comedian Dom Joly joined James Martin in his kitchen on Saturday morning to discuss his new and upcoming tour. Whilst speaking about his career and the role his childhood played in his success, Dom began to explain he used to go to school with Osama bin Laden. However, he slammed the chef when he interrupted his story and accused him of stealing his best anecdote. Wondering about his childhood in Lebanon, James asked, "Tell us about growing up in Lebanon." Dom began, "Well, I think growing up in Lebanon kind of explains a lot of why I do a lot of confusing things, because it's a confusing place. So I grew up there because my parents lived there, obviously, but it was an English family, and we'd been there for 2 generations for reasons that are way too complicated to explain. And when I was a tiny kid, Lebanon was pretty much the perfect place in the world. It was called Switzerland of the Middle East." Wondering about his childhood in Lebanon, James asked, "Tell us about growing up in Lebanon." Dom began, "Well, I think growing up in Lebanon kind of explains a lot of why I do a lot of confusing things, because it's a confusing place. So I grew up there because my parents lived there, obviously, but it was an English family, and we'd been there for 2 generations for reasons that are way too complicated to explain. And when I was a tiny kid, Lebanon was pretty much the perfect place in the world. It was called Switzerland of the Middle East. It was like living in the south of France, pine trees, Beirut was amazing, food is incredible, skiing an hour away, beach an hour away. Then, just as I got to an age where I was going to enjoy it, the whole place just exploded, civil war, and so I grew up in a really weird kind of schizophrenic life. Half of my school holidays, I was in a civil war, and then it'd be at a boarding school in England for school, and both were equally weird," he explained. James interrupted and asked, "Isn't it right that you went to school with bin Laden?" Teasing James, he said, "Well, you're ruining my best story in my talk, but I will tell it now. Bang, it's gone. It's one of my big punchlines, but yeah, it is. I went back to do a documentary on Lebanon after Trigger Happy, and I went back. I was actually supposed to be going on a road trip into Syria because, ironically, we used to go to Syria to get a bit of peace and quiet." Shocked at the revelation, James exclaimed, "Unbelievable." Vera star Brenda Blethyn on refusing to return to ITV series, Insight, Dom continued, "But when we got there, the director said, before we go off to Syria, might be nice to see where you went to school. Would be weird you going to school in the middle of a civil war, and I went to this school that was a Quaker high school above Beirut. I go to this school, and am there for a couple of years, and then I get sent off to boarding school because the war gets too bad. So when I go back, we're filming around the school, and the headmistress comes out, no one has asked permission. She goes, 'What are you filming here for?' And I go, 'Well, I'm an old boy, used to go to school here.' She goes, 'Who cares?' I go, 'Well, to be fair, I'm probably one of the most famous old boys here,' and she goes, 'Oh please,' and I go, 'Who's better than me?' And she goes, 'Osama bin Laden.' I was like, 'Oh, okay yeah,'" Dom laughed. James Martin's Saturday Morning airs Saturday at 9:30 a.m. on ITV.